I always thought I was born in a hospital. White walls, crying babies, cold doctors, that sort of thing. But turns out I was born during a fire. A fire that killed 13 people. And no one ever told me. It started with a box. An old, dusty box in my mother's attic, buried beneath a pile of winter coats and broken Christmas lights. She passed away 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. Sudden. Quiet. The kind of death that leaves more silence than grief. I wasn't close with her. We had the kind of relationship where you forget birthdays on purpose and only call during emergencies. Still, going through her things felt like stepping into someone else's life. There were love letters from a man I never met. A necklace with a strange black stone I don't remember her ever wearing. And at the bottom of the box, folded and yellowed with age, was a burnt newspaper clipping. Tragedy at Hollow Chapel. Fire claims 13 lives, 1 infant found alive. There was no photo. Just a short article with words half faded by time and smoke. It described a fire that happened in 1999. A secluded chapel outside a town called Ashvale Hollow. Authorities found 13 bodies and 1 newborn. No parents came forward. No name was given. Only a vague sentence. The infant, found swaddled in ash and blood, was transferred to St. Helena's Orphan Care, fate unknown. I stared at the date. August 11th, 1999. My birthday. My hands went cold. The attic felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were leaning in. I kept reading, hoping, praying. It was just some twisted coincidence. But there it was, scribbled in blue ink on the edge of the paper. Jack, you came from fire. Forgive me. The handwriting was hers. I sat there, heart thudding, surrounded by shadows and mothballs, trying to make sense of it. My mother wasn't the type to joke, and she never forgave easily. So what the hell did she mean? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with the clipping beside me, my mind racing through every conversation I ever had with her. Every time I asked about my father and got nothing but a quiet shake of the head. Every time I brought up my nightmares as a kid, fire chanting, a face with no eyes, and she told me to just forget it. She knew. She knew all along. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my laptop and typed it into the search bar. Ashvale Hollow, 1999 chapel fire. Nothing. Not even a mention. That didn't make sense. 13 people don't burn to death without a trace. So I searched deeper, way deeper. Old forums, scanned microfiche, and finally a locked thread in a conspiracy forum. It mentioned a town in West Virginia that had erased a fire at a church. Some claimed it was a cult cover-up. Others said the town never existed. But it does. I found it on a forgotten backroad map. Population, 314. No website, no tourism, just a dot in the trees. Ashvale Hollow. And just like that, I knew what I had to do. I had to go there. Because if I really was born in fire, then maybe, just maybe, the flames never went out. And maybe they're still waiting for me. The town sign was barely standing. A rotted wooden post leaned sideways, half swallowed by weeds, with faded white letters that read, "Welcome to Ashvale Hollow." Someone had spray painted over the bottom, black and angry, "Get out." I slowed the car and stared for a moment. This was the place. Quiet, hidden in the folds of the Appalachian Mountains like a scar under a sleeve. I pulled into town just as the last of the sun was dying behind the hills. Shadows stretched long over cracked pavement. The buildings looked tired, peeling paint, broken windows, rusted metal signs swinging in the wind. Time didn't pass here. It stalled and rotted. I parked in front of a gas station that looked like it hadn't seen real business in a decade. The neon open sign flickered like it was breathing its last breath. Inside, the smell hit me first, old oil, stale bread, and something faintly sweet like decaying fruit. The woman behind the counter didn't look up right away. She was knitting. Her hands moved slow, like each motion took effort. Her skin was paper thin, veins showing like ink on old parchment. I stepped closer, trying not to seem out of place. "Evenin'," I said casually. "Do you have a town map?" She looked up. Her eyes were cloudy blue, like stormy skies filled with secrets. For a moment, she just stared. Then her lips twitched. "You ain't from here," she said. "No, ma'am," I replied. "Just visiting. Family roots." She let out a small, wheezing laugh. "No one's got roots here. Not anymore. They all burned." My skin crawled. I nodded like I understood, even though I didn't. "I'm looking for the old church," I added. "Heard it's an interesting ruin." Her knitting stopped. She looked at me longer this time. Her face didn't change, but her eyes did. They narrowed like she saw something I couldn't. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. I blinked. "Sorry?" She leaned in, voice low. "They'll smell it on you." I didn't know what to say. My heart thumped once hard. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out dry. "That's some kind of local warning?" No, her voice was a rasp now. "It's a curse." The bell above the door rang. I turned. Someone had walked in. A tall man in a thick coat and wide-brimmed hat. He didn't say a word, just grabbed a soda and stood at the back watching. I bought a dusty bottle of water and left quickly. My hands were shaking a little as I closed the car door. I laughed at myself again, this time louder. It was just a weird small town. Old people say strange things. I'd grown up in cities, surrounded by noise and reason. There was no room in my life for curses. But as I drove deeper into Asheville, past boarded homes and swaying trees, I felt it. A weight. Not on my shoulders, under my skin. Like the road itself recognized me. And it didn't like what I was becoming. I've never liked the woods. Even as a kid, something about trees pressed too close together made me feel like I couldn't breathe. Like they were listening. Watching. But that morning, I found myself standing at the edge of Red Vale Woods, my boots digging into the wet soil, staring at the crooked wooden sign half swallowed by vines. The paint was faded, but the words were still there. No entry after dusk. By order of Asheville Town Council. There were claw marks on the wood. Real ones. 3 deep slashes. Too wide for any bear. I stepped over the rusted chain that once served as a gate and walked into the trees. They weren't normal trees. Not exactly. They leaned toward each other, almost touching at the top, blocking out the sky. The deeper I went, the redder the light became. It wasn't sunlight filtering through leaves. It was like the fog itself was glowing red. Like the forest was bleeding light. I followed a narrow path that twisted like it didn't want to be followed. Roots rose from the ground like fingers, and I tripped more than once. The air smelled like burned incense and copper. Then I saw it. The old church. Half swallowed by vines and time, the structure stood in a small clearing, its steeple cracked and leaning like a snapped bone. The front doors were gone, blackened by fire. Charred wooden beams jetted out of the roof. Nature had started to reclaim it, but even the plants seemed afraid to grow too close. I stepped inside. Ash crunched under my feet. The inside was dark, even with the red light bleeding through the gaps in the wall. I could still smell smoke, 26 years later. The altar at the far end was cracked in two, like something had struck it from above. I walked closer. That's when I saw the symbols, carved into the stone floor beneath the ashes. Circles, interlocking triangles, and a long vertical line with hooks like branches. My brain didn't understand it, but something inside me did. It hummed in my chest like a memory I never made. I knelt down and brushed the ash aside. The stone underneath was stained dark. Not just old burn marks, deeper. Like it had soaked something in. Blood, maybe. I touched one of the symbols. It burned. Not like fire, like ice that somehow stung. My vision blurred. The walls flickered. For a split second, I wasn't in the church anymore. I saw fire. A woman with long black hair and no eyes. She was standing in the flames, holding a newborn baby. My baby clothes. My blanket. She looked at me. Right at me. And whispered a name. Cethuriel. I stumbled back, fell hard on the stone floor. The vision vanished. The church was silent again. I sat there, heart racing, hands trembling. I couldn't explain what I saw, or why I knew deep down that the baby was me. That name. That impossible name. It echoed in my mind like thunder behind a mountain. Cethuriel. I left the church, barely remembering how I got back to town. My legs carried me, but my mind stayed behind, burned into the ash, lost in the red fog, staring at that eyeless woman holding me like I was something sacred. Or cursed. That night, I didn't sleep. And for the first time in my life, I dreamed of fire. And she was waiting in it. The gravel road twisted like a serpent through the woods, each curve swallowing more of the sun until only cold, filtered light remained. My tires crunched over dirt and dead leaves as I drove deeper into what locals called the North Ridge. According to the pamphlet I found pinned to the old post office bulletin board, this was where the Hollow Path Wellness Center claimed to offer healing through spiritual reconnection. It didn't say much else, but there was a symbol on the bottom corner, an ancient, jagged spiral I had seen before. In my dream. On the altar in the ruined church. I told myself I was just here to ask questions. Get answers. Dig up whatever I could on Madison Vurick and leave before nightfall. But as soon as I saw the place, I knew I wasn't leaving that quickly. The commune was tucked between the hills, surrounded by trees that looked older than memory. Several cabins circled a clearing with a massive bonfire pit in the center. Everything looked clean, quiet, almost too perfect. Wind chimes clinked softly in the breeze. White linen sheets hung from clotheslines like ghosts in the wind. Then I saw her. She was standing on the porch of the main house, barefoot, holding a cup of tea like it was some sacred thing. Long dark hair, piercing green eyes that didn't blink nearly enough, and this stillness about her, as if she were always listening to something no one else could hear. Madison Vurick. She smiled when she saw me, like she'd been expecting me. Jack Morin, she said before I could speak. My legs froze mid-step. How did you? You've come a long way to find yourself, she said gently, walking down the steps. Welcome home. That word hit harder than it should have. Home. I hadn't felt like I belonged anywhere since I read that burned clipping. I was hoping to ask you a few things, I said, clearing my throat. I'm a journalist. I write stories about weird things, local legends, hidden histories. I know, she said again, her smile never fading. And Asheville is full of them, isn't it? I nodded slowly. Well, she continued, gesturing toward the porch, we were just about to begin our morning reflection. Why don't you join us? You might find answers where you least expect them. I should have said no, but instead I followed her. Inside the main hall, a dozen people sat cross-legged in a circle on floor mats. Men and women all ages, dressed in white, eyes closed, humming low notes that vibrated in my chest. Candles burned at the edges of the room, and the air smelled of sage, ash, and something faintly metallic. I sat in the back, just watching. Madison took her place in the center of the circle and began to speak, not loud, not commanding, but with a voice like water slipping through cracks in stone. We are vessels, she said. We are soil waiting for the right seed. And some of us are born already blooming. Her eyes locked onto mine when she said it. The others didn't turn, but I felt them listening to me now, like I'd become the center of gravity in the room. She raised a bowl and placed it on the floor before her. Inside was a black liquid that shimmered like oil, but moved like it was alive. Drink, she whispered. Only if you're ready to remember. I didn't drink. I stood and left before the session ended. I sat outside on a bench, heart pounding. And yet, I didn't leave. Something kept me there. Something beneath the ground. Something behind Madison's smile. She found me later by a wooden archway covered in ivy. She handed me a cup of tea without asking. It smelled sweet, but I didn't trust it. I know why you're really here, Jack, she said softly. You've seen the shadows in your dreams. You've heard the name. The woods have spoken to you. You've felt it too, haven't you? The hunger inside. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, placing her hand on my chest. They never finished the ritual, she whispered. But you're still open. My breath caught. And that's when I realized. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was trying to prepare me. And the worst part, a small, buried part of me wanted her to. The hollow path didn't feel right. It wasn't the people. They were polite, always smiling, always speaking in soft voices like they were scared of waking something up. It wasn't even the smell of sage or the clean white robes they wore during sunrise meditations. It was how everything felt too controlled, too peaceful, like a still lake where you know something is swimming just below. Madison had given me a room on the second floor of the main house. It was small but neat. A bed, a desk, a small bookshelf with spiritual self-help books, and a window that faced the forest. The walls were thin. I could hear people whispering in the hallway at night. Not talking, whispering. Not words I could understand either. It sounded like another language. Or maybe just wrong. The next morning, I followed their schedule. Stretch. Breathe. Feel the stillness. Madison guided us, barefoot on the dew-covered grass. Everyone followed her like she was a saint. I copied the movements, my eyes half closed, but my focus was on watching. Always watching. After breakfast, I walked the grounds. I told them I wanted to clear my mind. No one stopped me. They wanted me to feel welcome. That's the trick of it. The main house was older than the rest. 3 floors, dark wood, big windows with heavy curtains. Madison's office was locked, of course, but there was another room next to it. It looked like a storage room. I tried the handle. Locked. I walked away casually. But I memorized the door. That night, I waited. The house was quiet after 11. I stepped out of my room in bare feet, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The hallway stretched long and dim, lit only by a single bulb near the stairs. I held my breath as I reached the storage room. The lock was old. I'd lifted enough apartment latches back in college to recognize a weak one. I used a bent hairpin and a tiny screwdriver from my camera kit. Click. The door creaked open like it hadn't moved in years. Inside, it smelled of mildew and burnt herbs. Dust swirled in the moonlight coming through the window. Shelves lined the walls, covered in candles, jars of dried roots, and thick books. Real old ones. Leather covers, no titles, just symbols on the spine. I moved slowly, scanning each shelf. Then my eyes caught it. A mural. Painted directly on the wall behind the shelves. It was massive, faded and cracked, but still clear enough to send a shiver down my back. A figure stood tall in the center. Human-like, but wrong. It had a hollow cavity in its chest, like someone had carved out its heart. Flames rose around it, but the fire bowed toward the figure, not away. Like it was worshipping it. And behind its head, a black sun. I stared for too long. I turned to the books. One had a cloth ribbon hanging from it, like a marker. I opened it. Drawings. Diagrams. Circles filled with letters I didn't recognize. The kind of writing that felt like it didn't want to be looked at. I turned one more page. There was a sketch of a baby, surrounded by people, and beneath it, 2 words. The vessel. I felt the air shift. A soft creak came from behind me. I froze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I turned around. Madison stood in the doorway. Her robe was black now, not white like earlier. Her eyes were calm, but her smile wasn't kind. I wondered how long it would take you, she said. I couldn't speak. She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. You're not ready to understand, but your body remembers, doesn't it? Her voice was low, soothing, like she was singing a lullaby only I could hear. I was just looking, I said, my voice dry and useless. She nodded slowly, walking closer. That's good, Jack. Keep looking. You need to see who you are, before you decide who you'll become. She walked past me, fingers brushing the spines of the books. This room isn't hidden. Not really. It's just that most people never think to look. She turned to face me again. Go back to your room now. I didn't move. She tilted her head. You'll find more when it's time. The hollow never rushes its children. Her smile faded. I'll lock this door behind you. So I walked out. The door shut behind me with a heavy finality. I heard the click of the lock, and I kept walking, heart pounding. She knew I was looking, and now I knew she was waiting. Not just for me, but for something inside me to wake up. I didn't plan on returning to Ashevale's town hall. Honestly, I didn't even think it would still be standing. But something kept tugging at me, like a string wrapped around my ribs, pulling tighter with each unanswered question. The building was a squat, sagging thing, made of cracked brick and gray wood, with a faded sign that read, Ashevale Municipal Records. It looked like it hadn't seen a coat of paint or a new light bulb since the 80s. I stepped inside, the old wooden floor creaking beneath my boots like it was warning me to turn around. Inside, it smelled like dust and mildew. The place was dead quiet, except for the slow tick of a wall clock. A woman sat behind the reception counter, hunched over a crossword puzzle. Her white hair was tied into a bun so tight it looked painful. Can I help you? She asked without looking up. Yeah, I'm trying to find a birth certificate. I hesitated, then added, mine. That got her attention. She squinted at me over her glasses, eyes narrowing as if searching her memory for something buried. Name? Jack Morin. Born October 28, 1999. Supposedly. Her fingers tapped the keyboard with exaggerated slowness. After a moment, she frowned. You weren't born at the county hospital? No. I thought I was. But there's no record there. So I thought maybe this place had something. She stared at the screen for another moment, then got up with a grunt and walked into the back room. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. I was starting to think she bailed on me when the door creaked open again, and she stepped out holding a dusty brown folder. She handed it to me, her hand trembling ever so slightly. There's not much, but it's yours. I opened the folder right there on the counter. Inside was a single page, yellowed with age. Across the top, in smeared typewriter ink, were the words, Certificate of Live Birth, Emergency Registration. No doctor was listed. No hospital. Place of birth, Holy Bridge Chapel, Ashevale Hollow. Time, 2:37 a.m. Witnesses redacted. Notes, see confidential file, case hashtag 9931AH. I stared at it, my heart thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. What does this mean? I asked. She didn't answer. Her mouth was pressed into a tight line. I turned the page over. There, faintly stamped in red ink, confidential, do not disclose. Before I could ask more, a voice cut through the air behind me. Shouldn't be digging in old graves, son. I spun around. A man stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame like it was the only thing holding him up. His clothes were ragged, beard scraggly, and his breath carried the sour stench of cheap liquor. One eye was clouded white, the other sharp as glass. "You know me?" I asked. He laughed, a dry, cracked sound that made the hair on my neck stand up. "I know what you are." The woman at the desk looked panicked. "Caleb, don't start." He ignored her and walked closer, pointing a shaking finger at the folder in my hands. "You ever wonder why there ain't no pictures of your mom pregnant? Or why you never got sick as a baby? Never cried even?" He leaned in closer. His breath was hot and rotten. "You weren't born, Jack. You were summoned." The room tilted. The word hit me like a brick. "Summoned?" I whispered. He nodded. "That church, Holy Bridge? It wasn't just a church. It was a doorway. They was trying to bring something through. They used her, your mama, as the vessel. But the fire stopped it. You came out anyway. Half done." My mouth went dry. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a shaky breath. "What are you talking about? What fire?" His face turned dark. "The one that killed 23 people. Burned the chapel to the ground. All part of that ritual. Madison was the high priestess. She vanished in the flames, or so we thought." The room felt smaller now, like the walls were inching closer. "She's still here," I said. "She runs the hollow path." His eye twitched. "Then the ritual ain't over. She's waitin'. Watchin'. Waitin' for the right night, the right stars, and you." I staggered back, clutching the folder to my chest. The woman behind the desk said quietly, "You should go now, Jack. Some things are better left in the ash." But it was too late. I'd seen it, held it, heard it, and I couldn't unknow it. I wasn't a man trying to uncover a story. I was the story, and it wasn't finished. I didn't plan to stay at the commune another night. I had already seen too much, whispers behind doors, flickering candles in windows long after everyone was supposed to be asleep, strange symbols painted faintly under welcome mats and on the back of mirrors. But I couldn't leave. Something held me here. Something I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way Madison spoke, like she was pulling words straight from my soul. Or the way the other members looked at me. Not with kindness. Not with suspicion. But with something worse. Worship. That evening, the sky turned gray as ash. The clouds hung low, heavy like wet wool. I sat on the edge of the commune's wooden deck, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of it all. But I wasn't alone. There was this pressure, like someone standing just behind me, breathing down my neck. I turned. Nothing. Just the red veil of trees swaying in the distance. Then I heard it. A voice. Not outside my head. Not really inside either. It was like it existed in the space between thought and sound. "Jack!" It stretched my name slowly, like it was tasting every letter. I shot to my feet, heart thudding. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer. Just silence, then the wind rustling the leaves. I backed into my room, slammed the door, and locked it. For a while, I just stood there shaking. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was something else. Something deeper. A pull. I looked at the mirror across the room. My reflection stared back. But something was wrong. My eyes. They flickered. A deep red. I blinked, stepped closer. The light in the room stayed the same, but my reflection shifted. My skin grew pale in the mirror, and my veins looked black, webbing under the surface like cracks in glass. Then my reflection smiled. But I didn't. I threw the mirror off the wall. It shattered into a dozen pieces, each one holding that same twisted grin. I backed away, breathing hard, trying not to scream. That's when I heard Madison's voice outside the door. "Jack, are you all right?" I said nothing. "I know it's hard," she said softly. "But you're waking up now. You're remembering." I didn't answer. I couldn't. She left eventually, her footsteps fading like mist. I sat on the floor the rest of the night, staring at the broken glass. One shard still shimmered with that smile, like it hadn't left. At some point, I dozed off. And I dreamed. I stood in the woods, naked, with ash falling from the sky. Madison stood in front of me, wearing robes the color of dried blood. Her arms were open, and behind her towered something black and burning, taller than trees, with wings that bled smoke. "You are the flame's first breath," she said, eyes glowing. "You are the hollow." When I woke up, My hands were stained with soot, and carved into my palm, just faintly, was a symbol I had never seen before. But somehow, I knew exactly what it meant. And I wished I didn't, because the voice wasn't done. It was only just beginning. I drove for miles without a destination, just the voice in my head and the knot in my chest guiding me. Madison had tried to smile the truth into my bones, but it only made me itch more, like something beneath my skin wanted out. The trees thinned and the road turned to dirt, kicking up dust in the mirror like ghosts chasing me. It was near dusk when I found the shack. Old, rotted wood. A rusty satellite dish pointing at the sky like a snapped neck. The place looked like it hadn't breathed in a decade. I would have passed it if not for the symbol on the mailbox, an upside-down crescent with a line through it. The same symbol I'd seen etched into my skin in a dream. I knocked. Nothing. Then, the door creaked open. A shotgun greeted me first. Back off. The voice was cracked, like gravel in a throat. I'm not here to hurt anyone, I said, raising my hands. I think I was part of it. The ritual. Asheville, 1999. The gun lowered. Slowly. A woman stepped forward, gray hair tied in a bandana, face carved with age and something deeper, fear. Her eyes darted to the woods behind me, then back to my face. Inside, she said. Quick. The door slammed behind me. Her name was Clara. She led me into a room where another man sat slumped in a chair, staring into a dead fireplace. His name was Boyd. His hands shook constantly, and his eyes never met mine. We were there, Clara said. We saw it all. The fire. The screaming. And you. I swallowed hard. Me? She nodded. You were the infant on the altar. They called you the vessel of Sethuriel, born of flame and ash. You didn't cry when you came out. You stared at us. I didn't remember that night. But my body did. Every part of me tensed. They were going to open the gate using you, she continued. But something went wrong. One of the acolytes, Madison's own sister, turned on them. She set the chapel on fire to stop the ritual. Thought she killed everyone. But I lived. You weren't supposed to. The silence that followed was like a held breath. Boyd finally looked up. His eyes were wet. They've been trying to finish it ever since. But they needed you to come back on your own. Why me? Why can't they just find someone else? You don't understand, Clara said, her voice trembling. You're not just a piece of the ritual. You are the ritual. Your birth began it, and your blood will end it or bring him through. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, listening to my own breath turn shallow. Clara lit a candle and pulled out a box wrapped in wax cloth. She opened it, revealing pages scorched around the edges. Symbols. Drawings. Names I couldn't pronounce. This is what they used, she said. This is the hollow doctrine. It's their scripture. I picked up a page. My hands shook. One of the drawings was a figure with hollow eyes and a flame in its chest. Beneath it, in red ink, he shall be flesh for the flame. Clara reached out and gripped my wrist. You're not evil, Jack. You're just unfinished. But if Madison gets her hands on you, she'll finish it her way. I wanted to run. But where would I go? Every road had led me here. Boyd leaned closer, his voice barely more than a breath. She's coming. We all feel it. The veil's thinning again. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. It wasn't just wind. It was whispering, calling me by name. And I was starting to answer. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was sitting on the porch of Madison's main house, nursing a cup of herbal tea she'd handed me with that warm, rehearsed smile. The next, I was waking up to the sound of crackling fire and low, rhythmic chanting. My head throbbed. My limbs felt numb, like they didn't belong to me. Above me, the night sky looked wrong. It wasn't the usual kind of darkness. It pulsed, like something alive was crawling beneath it. I tried to move, but my arms were bound. Not with rope. Something alive. Twisted roots wrapped around my wrists, warm and wet like veins. Then I realized where I was. A circle, carved into the earth. Burning. The flames rose from symbols written in ash and bone dust, glowing with a dull red light. I lay at its center, naked from the waist up, my chest marked with black ink. The same symbol I saw in the locked room at the commune, the hollow flame with the slit eye in the center. Dozens of figures surrounded me, dressed in pale robes. Their faces were painted white, but their mouths were black. Chanting poured from them like wind through a graveyard. Sethuriel, Sethuriel, come forth. That name again. That cursed name. Madison stepped into the circle. Her robe shimmered in the firelight, and her face was painted in silver ash. But her eyes, they weren't hers anymore. They glowed a dim orange, flickering like candlelight trapped in glass. She crouched beside me and whispered, "You're almost ready." I wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything, but my body refused. "It was always meant to be you," she said. "Born in flame. Protected by the unfinished ritual. You are the hollow gate, Jack. And now, we finish what they tried to stop." Her hands pressed against my chest. The mark burned. Not figuratively, it burned. Fire seeped into my skin like it belonged there. I could feel it sliding under muscle, curling around bone. My heart pounded, but the beats were no longer mine. Something else was knocking from the inside. Trying to get out, or trying to get in. I began to hear whispers. They weren't in the air. They were in me. "Do you know what it feels like when your thoughts aren't yours anymore?" The voice was deep. Not loud, but endless. Like a scream buried under 1,000 years of dirt. It said my name, over and over. Not as a greeting. As a command. "Jack! Jack! Jack!" Then the fire flared. The crowd fell silent. And Madison reached into her robe and pulled out a dagger. Ornate. Old. Bone-handled. The blade was black as coal, etched with symbols that shimmered red. With her other hand, she held something up, a jar. Inside it, floating in dark liquid, was a small, shriveled heart. "Mine. It was cut from you when you were born," she said, smiling. "Preserved until the day came." She opened the jar. The heart twitched. And then so did mine. I felt my ribs tighten. My chest pulled inward like it was being collapsed from the inside. My mouth opened wide, a scream tearing from my throat, but no sound came. Only heat. Only the scent of burnt flesh and wet soil. Then everything exploded. Not outward. Inward. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was inside something vast and ancient and cold. A memory that didn't belong to me played before my eyes. Hooded figures around my mother, her screaming, the smell of sulfur and blood, the priest holding me up to the flame as my first breath came out not as a cry, but a laugh. My birth wasn't natural. It was a summoning. And now it was happening again. But something inside me pushed back. Not with fire. Not with rage. But with refusal. I focused on one thought. I am not a gate. I am not yours. The heart in the jar stopped twitching. The blade in Madison's hand turned cold. The fire dimmed. I snapped the root bonds with a roar that wasn't entirely human. I didn't care. I leapt to my feet, grabbed the dagger from her hand, and slashed the air between us. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about breaking the circle. The flame line split. The sigil cracked. A wind howled through the clearing, cold, furious, screaming with voices too many to count. The robed followers dropped to the ground, shrieking. Madison stared at me, not with anger, but with awe. "You're stronger than him," she whispered. "You're not the gate. You're the storm behind it." And then something pulled her back. Not me. Not the wind. Something else. She vanished into the smoke, her scream echoing like a bell in the dark. I stood alone in the broken circle, chest heaving, skin burned, eyes filled with smoke. But the mark on my chest was gone. And the voice inside me? Silent. For now. But I knew this wasn't the end. They'd tried to finish the ritual. But maybe I would be the one to finish it, on my terms. Or die trying. The cabin creaked like it was breathing. Every wooden plank moaned under the weight of something I couldn't see. I sat in the corner, knees pulled tight to my chest, blood still crusted under my fingernails from clawing my way out of the ritual circle. My breath came in short, broken gasps. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the fire, the chanting, and the way Madison's voice wrapped around me like silk soaked in oil. I was supposed to be sleeping. But sleep was a joke now. The dark didn't bring rest. It brought memories, some mine, some not. There was a knock at the door. Not loud. Not urgent. Just steady. As if whoever was knocking already knew I would answer. I grabbed the old hunting knife I'd taken from the basement and opened the door a sliver. She was there. Madison. No guards. No cultists. Just her. Standing calmly beneath the porch light like she'd come to borrow sugar. Her eyes were as calm as a lake before it freezes. "Jack," she said softly, "you look exhausted." "Go to hell," I whispered. She smiled. "I've already been there. I came back for you." I tried to close the door, but her hand shot forward and pressed it open with a strength that didn't match her frame. "Don't do this," I said. "You lost. You don't get to talk like we're friends." "You think I lost?" She stepped inside. I stepped back. She shut the door behind her. "I escaped," I said. "I ruined your little ceremony." She tilted her head. "You escaped because I let you." You needed to see it. Feel it. Sethurial is not a creature you understand yet. But you will. That thing doesn't belong in this world. Madison sighed and looked around the cabin like she was disappointed in the decor. You've always thought in binaries. Light and dark. Right and wrong. Human and inhuman. But you're forgetting, Jack, you're both. My hands trembled. You think I wanted this? I snapped. You think I asked to be born in a ring of fire surrounded by lunatics? No, she said softly. But you were chosen. Born not just by flesh, but by will. I was there. I caught you when you came out screaming. You didn't cry like normal babies. You laughed. Liar. She stepped closer. I didn't move. You feel it now, don't you? She whispered. The warmth inside your ribs. The way shadows bend when you walk past. The things whispering when you're alone. That's not madness. That's your inheritance. I shook my head. I'm not your vessel. I'm not your tool. No, she agreed. You're the key. Madison reached into her coat and pulled out a small mirror, cracked and stained at the edges. She held it up to me. My reflection blinked. But I didn't. It stared back with red irises. A mouth that smiled before mine did. I staggered backward. What is that? That's the truth beneath your skin, she said. The part you keep buried. The part that's waking up. I grabbed the mirror from her and threw it against the wall. It shattered into a dozen shards, each one catching a sliver of my twisted reflection. You're insane. Madison didn't flinch. Insanity is refusing what you are, denying the design you were born for. I'm not a design, I growled. I'm not a prophecy. I'm just a doorway, she interrupted. And I am your threshold. I didn't realize I was crying until my vision blurred. What do you want from me? She leaned in and touched my cheek. Her skin was cold as marble. I want to finish what we began. Together. You and I. When the flames rose, when the blood spilled, when the stars aligned and the veil cracked, you were born. Half of you here. Half of you waiting. Waiting where? She smiled wider. Where the fire never dies. Where names burn and time weeps. Where Sethurial sleeps, curled like smoke, whispering to his son. I stumbled back like her words were punches. I'm not his son, I said, barely hearing my own voice. Madison turned to leave, her footsteps silent against the wooden floor. You'll come to me, she said, pausing at the door. Not because I summon you, but because you'll need answers. And when that time comes, don't be afraid of what you are. The door opened. The night wind howled in. Be afraid of what happens if you don't accept it. Then she vanished into the fog. And I was alone again. Except I wasn't. In the broken mirror shards, my reflection kept moving. Smiling. Waiting. I've never seen the world look that dark at noon. The sky above Ashvale had turned the color of dying embers. No sun. Just a red hue that made the trees look like they were bleeding. The wind didn't move. No birds. No sound. Just the crunch of dried leaves under my boots and the quick breath in my chest as I made my way back to the ruined church. I had the book. Or rather, the piece of it. Torn, stained, pages stitched together by a man who had once been mad, or maybe sane in a world that went mad around him. It was written in 2 languages, Latin and something older. Something that moved when I stared at it too long. The words shimmered like oil on water. Elena, one of the last 2 survivors of the original cult fire, had told me, it's not just about undoing what they did to you. It's about choosing who you are, Jack. Because once the gate opens fully, you may not be the one who walks back out. I didn't want to be a gate. I wanted to be me. I stepped into the burnt chapel. The stone floor was cracked, the air thick with soot and something else, something damp and coppery, like old blood that never fully dried. The altar was still there, charred and half collapsed, covered in moss and strange symbols that pulsed faintly now. That was new. I took a deep breath, unwrapped the book, and set it on the altar. My hands shook. The text was hard to look at, hard to read aloud, but I didn't need to understand it fully. I just needed to speak it with intent. The first line was sharp on my tongue, like chewing glass. As I spoke, the ground under my feet trembled. The air turned heavy, pressing against my chest like invisible hands. My breath caught, and then something answered. Not in words. In pressure. In pain. I stumbled back, my head ringing like a bell hit too hard. I fell to my knees, coughing, tasting iron. When I looked up, the church wasn't just burned, it was alive. The walls breathed. Shadows danced, even though there was no flame. And standing at the center of it all, Madison. Her white dress was stained red from the hem up. Her eyes were glowing like coals. and her voice came before her mouth moved. You can't silence something that was born screaming, Jack. I stood slowly, the book clutched to my chest. I'm not here to silence it. I'm here to stop it from using me. She smiled. Stop it? You are it. She raised her hands, and the shadows leapt from the walls. They crawled across the floor like snakes, circling me, hissing with voices I remembered from my dreams. Your soul is cracked, she said. You were never meant to live a normal life. You were born in blood, in fire. You are the flame that never dies. But I had something she didn't. I had doubt, and I had my name. I began the second part of the ritual, my voice hoarse, throat burning. The words weren't just in the book anymore. They were inside me, like I'd always known them, like they were waiting for me to find them. Madison screamed. The shadows recoiled. And then everything broke. The floor beneath the altar split wide open, revealing a pit that glowed from within. Not with fire, but with something worse. A light that bent wrong. A place that didn't belong here. I heard whispers rise from it, dozens, hundreds, all in unison. They said one thing. Sethurial. I almost fell. My knees buckled. My vision blurred. I felt my spine arch, as if something inside me wanted to climb out. My skin burned with symbols I couldn't see. But I kept reading. I shouted the final phrase, louder than thunder, louder than Madison's howling. And then, silence. No wind. No breath. The pit closed with a sound like stone grinding bone. The walls of the chapel stopped breathing. The shadows died. Madison stood at the edge of the altar, eyes wide, hands trembling. She looked older now. Frail. Like whatever power she'd fed on had been ripped out of her. She mouthed something. I think it was why. And then she was gone. Just ashes where she stood. I fell to the floor, breathing hard. The book burned in my hands, turned to dust between my fingers. I watched it vanish, grain by grain. It was over. At least. I wanted to believe that. But as I sat in the silence, something inside me shifted. Not painfully, just noticed. The ritual was broken. But the vessel? The vessel still lived. And I was still here. Alive. Alone. Listening to the woods whisper my name. They say when a fire dies, silence follows. But that night in Ashevale Hollow, silence never came. I stood at the edge of the woods, the last flames of the Hollow Path commune flickering in the distance. Smoke curled into the sky like hands retreating from heaven. The air was thick with ash, and somewhere beneath the crackling wood, I thought I heard whispers. Madison was gone. Or maybe not. I don't even remember the exact moment it ended. 1 second she was standing in front of me, robes soaked in blood, chanting words in a language that tore at the sky. The next, there was only light, blinding red light, followed by screaming that didn't come from human throats. Then the ground split. The circle shattered. And I ran. My legs carried me without thought, as if something else had taken over. I didn't look back. Not when the fire surged behind me. Not when the sky bled. Not even when I heard her voice call my name, soft like a lullaby. Now I was alone. Again. The church ruins were behind me. The woods around me pulsed. Everything felt still, but not peaceful. Still like something holding its breath. I stumbled through the forest for what felt like hours. My hands were torn from the thorns. My arms burned from the ritual marks Madison had carved into my skin. But I kept going, kept moving, afraid that if I stopped, the ground beneath me would open and drag me back into the fire. I reached the road, just as the sun began to rise. A weak, pale light. The kind that doesn't warm. The kind that makes you wonder if night ever really ended. I collapsed on the gravel, breathing hard. My fingers gripped the earth like it would float away if I let go. My heart was still pounding from more than fear. There was something else. A throb. A hum. Deep inside my chest. It had been growing ever since that night. Ever since I saw Madison disappear into that burst of light and heard the word vessel burn into my skull like a brand. I sat up and looked at my reflection in the window of an old, rusted truck parked nearby. My eyes were still brown. But just for a second, just the quickest flicker, I saw something else behind them. Something red. Something patient. The cult was gone. Madison was gone. The ritual was unfinished, broken. But the truth? I wasn't. Something had been opened in me. Something stirred in my bones when the wind rustled the trees. Sometimes I heard footsteps when I was alone. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I felt someone else blinking with me. I didn't know what I was anymore. Not fully human. Not demon either. Just in between. A gate. A hollow. I stood up slowly, brushing ash from my jeans. My legs trembled, but they held. I looked out at the sunrise, thinking maybe I'd start walking again. Leave Asheville. Try to be normal. But I knew it wouldn't last. There's something about being born in blood and fire. The world doesn't let you forget it, especially when it's still watching you. That night, back in my motel room, I caught my reflection again. Only this time, it didn't copy me. It smiled. And I didn't. The ritual wasn't over. It never was.